Hi everyone, it's Alice, and today I'm gonna wrap up the books I read in March. I feel like my reading so far this year is going quite well. Like I'm at a good pace, at least for me, which I'm super happy with. Usually at this point in the year it starts tapering off a little bit and then it picks up over the summer, but yeah, I've been reading quite a lot and that's always great. This month I've read some really good books. I've read some that I didn't like as much, but we do have a 5-star this month, which is always fun. Let's just get into the reviews though, starting with the first book that I finished, which was The Will of the Many by James Islington. This is a fantasy book with a little bit of mystery to it, I guess, and it's set in a world that is ruled by something called a hierarchy, and they have this magic system in this world that is, to put it very simply, like a pyramid scheme but with magic. It's kind of difficult to explain, but when you read the book, it makes total sense. We're following a character in this world, though, who has been through a lot of hard times, and he's an orphan, and through various events, he basically ends up at this really prestigious school. And no one really knows who he is there because he's lying about who he is, and no one knows that the hierarchy basically killed his whole family. It's really hard to summarize this book, I gotta say, because there's a lot more to it, but it basically follows a very determined young man in this terrible system, and he is trying to survive and find answers. Anyways, this is a book that I'd heard a lot of good things about. I'd seen it around a lot, and it really sounded like something that I would like. I was a little intimidated by the size, but I decided to just jump in, and it was really, really good. First of all, I think the world, the society, and the magic system in here is really interesting. I really liked learning about it. I also love the setting of the school. I don't really want to call it a magic school, even though that's kind of what it is, because that isn't what it feels like, because it's not like traditional magic, I guess. But I really liked the setting of the school, but I also like that we get to see other parts of this world, and that really gives you like a good overview of the world and the system and all of that. And there is something about the way this is written that felt very compulsive. Like I felt really sucked into this, and I could not get enough of it. I also really like how the plot is paced to take us through different parts of this world. It felt very natural, but I'm also impressed with how much we got to see. There is quite a lot of action in this book, I would say, and there's a lot of stuff that happens, but it feels very well balanced. And one of the things that I really like about this book is that there is a lot of plot to it, but it's interspersed with like historical stuff of this world and characters, and I feel like it was very well balanced. And you may know that I am the kind of reader that loves character. Like, I would pick a character driven book over a plot driven book, but I feel like this is the perfect mix of character and plot. Now, when it comes to the characters, I really liked reading about them as well, and I really liked following our main character and learning about his backstory and his motivations and what drives him, and seeing him through the story. I was really invested in him as a character. He is a little bit that kind of character that, like, he's kind of good at everything, and I wouldn't say that he goes through the book unscathed, but sometimes I do think that things are a little bit convenient, I guess. I feel like it makes sense that it is that way though, because it's sort of like he's not without fault, but sometimes I feel like, yeah, maybe things were a little bit convenient sometimes. Like he's good at almost everything. But it makes sense with the book that that's the way it is, and it doesn't really matter. It was just something that I noticed. Another thing that I noticed though that I cared a little bit more about that I didn't like as much, and I don't know if this is just a thing that I find annoying, but the characters in this book, the main character plus the other students at the school, they are all supposed to be 17, and they do not feel 17 to me. They feel much older. And it's not one of those things where everyone is just like wise for their age or whatever. I just felt like I feel like it makes sense in the context of the book that they need to be that age, but the characters feel like way older. And I don't know if it's supposed to be like that, but I don't know. I'm the kind of reader where I find that a little bit annoying, I think, because you are very young when you're 17, and these characters, even though they've been through a lot, like especially the main character, they still like he still feels older, I think. There is also a couple of things that happen towards the end that I'm not going to mention what it is because I don't want to give it away, but there were some things towards the end that I felt were very convenient. I am being super nitpicky with these things though, because for the rest of the book, like I have no complaints. It was so incredibly good. It was well crafted, and the end, oh my god. I don't know what I expected, but I did not expect that at all. And it blew my mind. Like when I finished this book and I put it down, I just sat there and I was like, what the hell just happened? And I do understand what happened. Well, kind of. But it just took such a turn and it was so exciting. It's so weird. And I feel like it really fits with this story. And I cannot even imagine how like the next book is going to be. Like how are you going to handle that? Because oh my god, I really wish that I had the second book already because I cannot wait to read it. I haven't actually looked if we have a date for it yet or when it's coming out, but I am so curious and I'm definitely going to read it the minute it comes out because this first book, it was so good. So despite some small things, I think I mentioned those things because I want to give this 5 stars, but I don't feel like it's quite there. So I'm gonna give it 4 for now. And then maybe once I've fully digested it and I've forgotten about some of these small things, I'll go back and give it a 5. It really was like excellent. And if you like fantasy with like a really cool world and a cool magic system and quite a lot of politics and a lot of twists and turns, I would really recommend this. I'm not a huge fantasy reader or especially like this kind of high fantasy, but I have read a good chunk, I would feel. And this is one of the better ones that I've read. It's really, really cool. It's also well written. There's great characters and a lot of exciting stuff. And the end will blow your mind. Like, I can't imagine it won't. Because it's crazy and it's so good. And yeah, such a good book. I would really, really recommend it. Secondly, I read another kind of chunky book. This is Intermezzo by Sally Rooney. This is a contemporary fiction novel, and the story is about these two brothers who lose their father. And these brothers are very different from each other, and they have quite an age gap, and they don't always get along. And the story is really about them dealing with their grief and each other in the aftermath of their father's death. If the way that I describe this book makes you think that this is one of those books where not a lot happens, you would be right. This is a very, very character driven book. Like, there is stuff that happens in it, but it really is all about their characters and their inner lives and everything that happens in these months after the passing of these characters' father. Like, it is very, very character driven. Now, for me, as someone who loves character driven books, I was really, really looking forward to this, but I was also a little bit apprehensive. I read Normal People by Rooney before and I adored it. And then I tried reading another book by her and I could not get into it. Like, I put it down and I don't think I'm ever going to read that book, to be honest. And so I wasn't sure what I was gonna think of this, but I'm happy to report that I loved it. It was amazing. Rooney has a very particular writing style, which you'll know if you've read anything by her. And like I said, I've only been able to get into it with Normal People, but I was also able to get into it with this. It took a little bit of time because it is very different from other kinds of writing that I usually read. Like, it's very specific, so it took me a little bit of time to get into, but once I was in, I was in. And I was so invested in this book and it really, really sucked me in. And like, I couldn't stop reading it. It's been a while since I've been this invested in the characters that I've been reading about. And I just feel like it's because this author goes really deep and there's something very emotional and personal about the way that she writes these characters, and you feel like you really get to know them. And at least for me, even though they are not perfect and sometimes you don't like them or you don't agree with them, you end up sort of rooting for them anyway because you understand them on such a deep level. It is a book about relationships as well, both familial and romantic, and that is a big part of the book. And I don't know, you just, at least for me, I feel like these characters, I just understood them, even when they made mistakes, even when they miscommunicated and there was something wrong. I just felt like I was there with them and I really understood them and they felt so real to me. Like they feel like real people. Like I'm kind of convinced that they are living out there somewhere. I also just really like books about sibling relationships. I always think that's a very interesting dynamic to look at, and the dynamic in here is definitely interesting to take a look at. And you get both sides, which I also really like. I also actually like that, like, the chapters tell the stories from the perspective of the two brothers, and the writing in them is kind of different from one another, which I thought was interesting. They're both in Rooney's style, obviously, but they really have very distinct, different voices, and I really enjoyed that. And yeah, I just feel like these characters were made alive and they felt so complex. Like I said, I adored Normal People. That book was like a knife to the heart, but I gave it 4 stars, I think, and I'm gonna give this 5 stars because I just loved it so much. And I think I love Normal People, but the center of that book is a romantic relationship. And even though there are romantic relationships in here, the story is more about these brothers. And I think I'm just a little bit more interested in that. And it just worked so well for me. I loved the characters. I couldn't get enough of this book. I loved the writing. It is one of those books that I wouldn't recommend to everyone because I think that this writing loses some people and I understand it. It's the kind of writing where like it doesn't say when people are talking, there are no quotation marks when there's dialogue, so you kind of just have to figure it out. And I remember when I read Normal People, I was like, I don't know if I like that. And I usually don't like it, but Rooney is like the person to do it because she does it so well. And yeah, this was amazing. It's gonna be in my top reads of the year. I don't hand out 5 stars very often, so whenever I give a book 5 stars, it always ends up in my top of the year. But like it was so good. And I kind of wish this book was even longer because I would have loved to spend more time with these characters. Like me saying that I want a book to be longer, that doesn't happen very often. So that's like that says a lot. Moving on, I then picked up The Hollow Places by T. Kingfisher. Can't go too long without reading anything by this author. And this one is a horror book, like I guess contemporary fiction horror, and there is some fantasy in this book. And it follows this woman who, after her divorce, she moves back to where she's from, and to avoid moving in with her overbearing mother, she, like her uncle, offers her a place to live at his curiosity museum. So she can live there and work there a little bit. And this museum is very strange. Like, picture taxidermy and shrunken heads and like mysterious junk. Like, that's the vibe. And she sort of goes there to heal in a way, and she's a little lost in life. And then one day, she finds a hole in the wall of this museum, which leads to a hallway that shouldn't be there, or like a corridor, and it's kind of impossible that it is there. And she explores it, and on the other end of it she finds this weird place that is all of these little islands, and in this world there are things that want to eat you or maybe experiment on you, and honestly it's just really really scary. I'm continuing my obsession with this author with reading this book, and of course it didn't disappoint. This does lean more into the horror than I had expected. It was creepier than I expected and honestly kind of scary. Like when I got towards the end of this, I just needed to finish it because I just needed it to be over because it was like actually terrifying. And with this author, like sometimes she has horror elements in her book, but it's not that scary. And it's kind of hard to predict how scary it's going to be. But I would say out of the ones that I've read by this author, this one is definitely one of the ones that lean more into the horror. Maybe it was because I could really picture all of the stuff in here, like this other world and all of the creepy stuff in it. Like, I don't know, but I could really see it, and it was terrifying, but it was terrifying in like a fun way. And one of the things, I think I mentioned this every time I review a T. Kingfisher book, one of the things that I love so much about her writing is that there is like a humorous tone to it. So it has this mix of horror and humor that is very hard to explain, and I think it wouldn't work for everyone, but for me it really works and I really, really enjoy it. I think it lightens the mood a little bit, which maybe some people find ridiculous, but for me it really helps because things get really scary. Not only did I like this other world, well, not like, but I thought it was interesting, this other world that we got to see. I also really like the parts that are set in our world, and I really like the setting of this museum. Like, it's one of those places that I would love to live, minus the hole in the wall and the scary world, but it's one of those places that I could really picture, and I really like the atmosphere of it. I also really like the atmosphere of this little town that we get to see, and I like this sidekick character that is introduced, and becomes the main character's friend, and I really liked seeing them through this together and them sort of trying to figure out what's going on and honestly trying to survive. I also just really like how weird this is. Like, the way that this author does weird, it scratches a particular part in my brain that I find very satisfying. So I really, really enjoyed it. I will say though, I'm not a huge horror reader and I don't read a lot of horror, so I don't know how crazy this would be to other readers who read a lot of it. But to me, this was like pretty scary, and yeah, it was a lot, but I could handle it. I'm glad it wasn't that much longer though, because things got pretty freaky. I'm giving this a 4 out of 5 stars. Another great one from this author, and I think this is my 6th book by her, and I've enjoyed all of them. So yeah, next month I'll probably read another one by her and we'll see what we find in there. I would really recommend this if you like fantasy horror and if you like the idea of someone finding a hellish version of Narnia in a hole in a wall in their museum. Like, that's very much the vibe. After that, I needed to read something a little bit lighter, so I picked up Welcome to the Hyunam-Dong Bookshop by Hwang Bo-Reum. And this is a contemporary fiction novel. It's translated from Korean, and the story is about this woman who has left behind her whole life, quit her job, gotten divorced, and she has moved to this little neighborhood and opened up a bookshop. And the story is all about her and some of the people connected to this bookshop and them just going through life. This is one of those books that I know some people will read and be like, this is the most boring thing I've ever come across. But for me, like, I'm a reader who likes these quiet slice of life kinds of stories, so I thought I would really like this. I was a little bit worried about it being boring actually, because sometimes these books are, but I ended up really enjoying this one actually. I think the reason that this worked for me is that I immediately got invested in the characters that we meet in the story. I think it's clever that we're not just following the bookshop owner, but we're also following these other people, and they're all connected to the bookshop, and that is the thing that connects them. And I really like that the bookshop means different things to the different characters, and I like that they all have their own struggles and thoughts and ideas, and we get to see all of their perspectives, and the bookshop is what brings them together. I also just really like books about books, which is what this is, and I loved seeing the everyday life in this bookshop. Like, it really came to life for me. It's a story about friendship and community, and there are bits of wisdom here and there that I really liked. And it really is just a slice of life kind of book, and it's a book about people and life. Another thing I really liked was the writing and the pacing of this book. Actually, it is a slow book, I'm not gonna lie, but the chapters are quite short, and so it doesn't feel like it drags, or at least to me, it didn't feel like it dragged. It just felt like a very heartwarming story about a bookshop and the people connected to it, and I really, really enjoyed it. To me, this is a 4 out of 5 star read, and I think if you like books like Days at the Murasaki Bookshop, you might like this as well, but obviously if you didn't like that book, you're probably not going to like this one either. Then I wanted to read a mystery, but I was kind of in a mood for something on the lighter side, so I picked up A Spoonful of Murder by J.M. Hall. This is, I guess you would kind of call it a cozy mystery, and the story is about these 3 retired school teachers who gather every week to eat cake and gossip and catch up, and then one of these days they run into an old colleague of theirs who soon after turns up dead, And because these three women are convinced that there's more to that death than meets the eye, they get involved. So I went into this book not expecting to have my mind blown really, because usually these kinds of cozier mysteries or like lighter mysteries aren't super mind blowing, but I like reading them every once in a while just for something fun and enjoyable. And I had seen kind of mixed reviews for this, so I wasn't expecting that much. And yeah, this was not it. I actually don't have that much to say about this book, to be honest, because I've almost forgotten the whole thing already, because there's nothing here that really stands out to me. The characters felt very flat to me. The three main characters, like the retired school teachers, all kind of bled into one another. There was nothing really that stuck out with the setting or the atmosphere, and it just felt kind of bland. Then there's the mystery, which about a third of the way through the book I had figured out, but I was kind of hoping that it would surprise me towards the end, but alas, it did not. I also just felt like this book was very slow, like the pace was very slow. I don't know if that's just because I was really bored throughout this book. Like maybe that's why it felt so slow to me, but I really did not care about any of this. If nothing else, it does have a cute cover, but like in hindsight, I should have just DNF'd this book and moved on with my life, to be totally honest. I don't necessarily feel like there's anything wrong with it, and I do think some people could enjoy this, but it was just not for me. I don't hate it, I just don't feel anything towards it. And like, give me a couple of weeks and I will have forgotten this whole thing. Like, I will have forgotten that I even read it, to be honest. So, I guess 2 out of 5 stars. Yeah, not for me. Second to last, I read Matrix by Lauren Groff. This is a historical fiction novel, and it follows this woman in the 12th century who is sent away from her life at court to run this abbey. And its nuns are like on the brink of starvation, and the story is all about her taking charge of these nuns and this place. This is a book that I've had for a few years, and I kind of just picked up on a whim. I had heard kind of mixed things about this. Some people love it, some people don't like it as much. And I sort of went into it with middling expectations, but I was excited to try something from this author because I wanted to. But now that I've read this book, I don't know if this was the place to start. The thing about this one is that I liked it, but I didn't love it. And I really felt when I was reading this that I wasn't feeling as strongly towards this story and these characters as I should have. And I can't really make sense of why I didn't feel more in this book, because it's a character driven story. It has an interesting main character who is not always likable. She is an interesting character. It has an interesting historical setting, and I feel like all of these ingredients should have made for a great read for me. And then for some reason, I just didn't feel invested in it at all. I do think the writing is good. This is the kind of writing that I very often love. Like, it's very descriptive, kind of slow in a way, and I feel like it really should have worked for me. So I can't pinpoint why it didn't. There were parts of this that I would read again because I thought it was really beautiful, but the story, I don't know. I do wonder if I just picked this book up at the wrong time and I wasn't in the mood for it, and maybe that's why it didn't work for me, because I don't know why else it wouldn't have worked for me. I really don't have that much more to say about it, to be honest. I haven't thought a lot about this book since I finished it, and I don't know. It just feels like a me problem with this book, and I don't know why it didn't work for me right now, but it just kind of didn't. It's somewhere between like a 2 and 3 star read for me. That feels very harsh because I feel like a lot of people would like this book, but I don't know. It just wasn't it for me right now, and to be totally honest, it feels kind of forgettable. Lastly, I read The League of Lady Poisoners by Lisa Perrin. This is an illustrated nonfiction book, and it's all about these women throughout history who used poisons in various ways for various reasons. And we get to read about their stories, but we also get to read a little bit about the history of poison and some different kinds of poisons and things like that. Now, this is a beautiful book. Like, obviously it's beautiful on the outside, but it also is beautiful on the inside. There are all of these different illustrations. Like in the beginning, we get to read about poisonous plants and things like that. And then each of the stories about these women have an illustrated portrait, which was great. And there are also these little illustrations throughout the whole thing, and it's just a real treat to get to read. I really enjoyed this one, which isn't surprising to me because I usually really like books like these, and I feel like the way that I read it was great. I put this on my nightstand and I read a little bit every night, and I did that based on some advice that I got when I hauled this book. Someone commented like you should just read a little bit here and there, like that's the best way to read this book. And I feel like that was great advice, and it was a great way to end the day with poison, murder, and death. I think if you read this all in one go, it would feel quite repetitive, and there are some parts that are repetitive, but I really enjoyed it anyway. I really liked reading about the history of poisons and all of these different stories. I didn't know or had heard about most of these women, so I thought that was really cool. And I feel like the length of the stories are perfect because you get the gist of their stories without diving in too deep, if that makes sense. It is very much what it says it is, though, so I don't know if I really have that much more to say about it. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was very interesting, and I do really like the illustrations. I think that adds a lot to this book. I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 5 stars, and yeah, I would actually love to know if any of you have any recommendations for books about poisons and their place in history. I think that could be really interesting to read about because we only get a little bit about that in here, and I would like to learn some more. Not for any particular reason, it's just good to know. That was the last book that I finished though, and yeah, I feel like overall I had a pretty good reading month. I'd love to know how your reading has been lately and what you've read. Tell me all about it in the comments, and as always, thank you very much for hanging out with me today, and I will see you soon. Bye!